What's up, guys? My name's Jay, and welcome to the Zen of Story podcast. I love all things story, and as a story addict, I'll be taking a look at the greatest stories out there, whatever the art form or language, and examine why they work so well and how they've made a mark on our lives. So, let's see what we have today. Director Richard Curtis is a British director with the unique and I think quite rare ability of being able to weave heartfelt stories with light-hearted tone and comedy. 2011's About Time is no different. It stars Domhnall Gleeson and Rachel McAdams, and it's a story about a young man by the name of Tim, who on his 21st birthday is told by his father that the men in their family have the special ability to travel back in time. And, surprise, surprise, they can change the events of the past as they want it to be. Now, I am a huge time travel fan, and I have such a soft spot for all things time travel. So when I first heard about this film, I must admit I actually went, ugh, because my nerdy side thought, oh god, they've gone and turned a really complex and fascinating science fiction trope into some lousy, cheap plot device for a rom-com. But of course, because I'm a sucker for all things time travel, I obviously still went and watched the film. And whew, boy was I wrong. I went into this film with relatively low expectations, thinking that it would be another light-hearted entertainer. And by the end of the film, all I said was, damn, I did not see that coming. You see, About Time is that story that carries with it a rather curious marketing strategy that on the surface level parades itself as a romantic comedy. But it's actually a story about life, about our time with our family, about our time with our loved ones, and ultimately, time. It's quite literally about time. Okay, so obviously that's gotta be the dumbest way to sum up this film, but really the title itself is what the film is. It's about a man who journeys from messing around with time travel in order to create the perfect, emphasis on perfect life for himself, to a journey where ultimately at the end he's asking himself through experience why he would actually consider time traveling in the first place. You see, time traveling is a delicious plot device to use in stories because it serves up so much opportunity for conflict, and any lover of story knows that we love conflict. But few stories out there actually go, hold on a second, why am I doing this? Why would I want to travel through time? What is my motivation for doing so? Most writers might concern themselves with, okay, so here we're dealing with time travel and we're going to say that he can go into the past and change the events so that he can change his future. So we gotta do it right so we avoid any paradoxes. Yeah, and that's true. There are tons of paradoxes to the science of time travel. I mean, ever heard of the grandfather paradox? It's the theory that if you go back in time and change something, that change could set into motion a chain of events that could end up with your grandfather not meeting your grandmother in the past, and in turn obviously then creates a paradox for your own future, that you could not exist in the first place to begin with. I mean, how could you if your grandfather hadn't met your grandmother? Paradox. But the film About Time chooses to skim over all of that. I mean, there's no device that they use to travel back in time, just a quiet space and a quiet thought, and voila. The movie doesn't even try too hard to solve the endless potential loopholes or paradoxes it creates from changing so many things in the past, except when it serves the purpose of the story. Which brings me to why it worked so well. About Time uses time travel mainly in the moments that serve up a moral argument for the protagonist, Tim, when he has to make two important decisions in his life, or a decision that encompasses two important aspects of his life. And it uses emotion to drive us past the logic or the reason of the details into a space of nostalgia, of appreciation and self-reflection about our very imperfect, extraordinary life. For example, at the beginning of the story, actually wait, before I carry on, I should warn you guys that if you haven't watched the film, now would be a good time to tune out perhaps, because I'm going to be diving straight into it and naturally there's going to be potentially some spoilers. Still here? Okay, let's go. So, in the beginning of the story, Tim develops a crush on his sister's friend, Charlotte. And at the end of their holiday together, he asks Charlotte to be his girlfriend. And she goes and says, "Oh, why did you wait till the last day? It's too late." So obviously what does Tim do? He goes back in time. He tells her earlier in the holiday that he wants her to be his girlfriend, to which she replies, let's rather wait till the end of the holiday. So there's two things that we can learn from the story. One, that girls just sometimes don't make any sense. And two, that Tim learns that he can't use time travel to make someone fall in love with him. Now, that doesn't stop him from trying, though. After he moves in with his playwright uncle, it was in London, yes, in London. After he moves in with his playwright uncle in London, he actually meets a girl called Mary. And the two of them hit it off, and Mary gives him her number. When he gets back home that night, however, he finds out his uncle's play was a disaster because the main actor forgot his lines. So what does Tim do? He goes back in time and he prevents that from happening at the play. But obviously in the process loses Mary's number from his phone because, well, he hasn't met her yet in this new timeline. See how the story uses timeline as a way to set up a series of conflicts of value for our hero. The paradoxes only come to light to provide a new challenge that ultimately aims to help Tim learn more about life, about time. It does serve up a morally ambiguous aspect as well, where Tim uses time travel in bits and pieces to finally reach Mary again and tweak their experiences together to make sure that she falls in love with him. Now, I know this was rocky and perhaps grey territory, and I think this was potentially where the movie could have become a full-on moral argument about if love can be manipulated and molded to create an experience that ends up leaving both the man and the woman inevitably in love with each other. But it doesn't dwell on that. Instead, it moves on to what its actual aim is, to teach us about life. You see, Tim's next time travel challenges come with essentially the conflict between his new budding family with Mary, surprise surprise, they end up getting married, and with his family, the original family he grew up with. His little sister Kit Kat is one of those lovable characters, but she describes herself as a faller of the family, someone who messes up, and while Tim is off in London, she doesn't find a job, she becomes depressed, and she ends up in a car crash. Now all of this happens at the same time Tim's first baby girl is about to be born, or rather just after she's born. And Tim, being the brother that he is, travels back in time to prevent his sister from getting into the car crash in the first place. However, he comes back in time and his girl has now turned into a baby boy. So it's at this point in the story where Tim's father explains to him that traveling back before a child is born would mean that a different child would be born given the different nature of the new timeline. So Tim learns that sometimes, even with the ability to travel through time, just like how one can't make someone fall in love with you, you can't change some aspects of your life unless you are willing to sacrifice one part of your life for another. The final lesson comes when Tim learns his father has terminal cancer that no amount of time traveling can cure. He learns from his father, who tells him that he's been living every day twice, each day without changing anything. And his father tells him that the purpose of this was that the first time he goes through each day with all the worries and anxieties that every moment of the day brings, just like how it is with all of us. But the second time, he knows what's going to happen, and instead travels through each moment of the day to appreciate every single aspect of it. This time noticing all the wonderful, quirky, imperfect, colorful details that we miss when we are anxious or stressed. Tim learns this from his father, and it's round about this time where him and his wife are expecting their third baby. So Tim now faces his final dilemma, where he knows he only has 9 months left with his father. Because any time traveling after his third son is born would mean that the third son would be different or not born at all after his father has passed away. So Tim uses the 9 months to travel to all the moments with his father, resting on and noticing the little details of the experience they had together, understanding the beauty of those mundane, imperfect, everyday experiences with his father, and learning to cherish even the worst of them. And on the day of his son's birth, where he has one last heartfelt reliving of his memory with his father, he's able to say goodbye in a way that most of us never could. And the emotional punch of this experience with his father forms the heart of the entire story. That our time, our lives are not made up by carefully crafted, perfect, extraordinary experiences. Our lives are wildly complex and intertwined with varying degrees of connection to the world around us, and living through it is a balancing act between the old and the new, between relationships, between fathers and sons, mothers and daughters, between our own ideals and our actual experiences in reality. In the final moments of the film, by that time watching it, we've forgotten all the questions that constantly arise in our heads as we're watching the film. Questions like, how does he travel forward when at the start he's told he can only travel back in time? Or why does he not share his secret with Mary, his wife? Or why does only one aspect of his future change instead of a potential butterfly effect when he changes one aspect of his past? The beauty of this film is that it is exactly where it wants us to be. You see, it quite literally proves its own point by making us ask all those very questions. All these rational questions reflect the very nature of who we are. I mean, think about it. We're people who are constantly striving for clear, perfect answers to every single question that life throws at us, and we want to exist in a space where everything makes sense. And here's the funny thing though. In truth, through the very real loopholes the story creates, About Time metaphorically shows us that our time here on Earth is riddled with confusing paradoxes where we try every day to clumsily, imperfectly navigate our way through conflicting relationships, where we try so hard to hold on to the nostalgia of the past and forget to slowly let it go, where we journey through time to learn new aspects of life, to appreciate facets of the old that we didn't notice the first time. It's one big, messy, beautiful life. And that's what the film was trying to show us all along. In the final scene, Tim wakes up next to Mary and his voiceover narrates the scene where he says, "And in the end, I think I've learned the final lesson from my travels in time. And I've even gone one step further than my father did. The truth is, I now don't travel back at all, not even for a day. I just try to live every day as I've deliberately come back to this one day, to enjoy it, as if it was the full final day of my extraordinary, ordinary life." About Time is a great example where the emotional element and crux of what it wants to say turns the very flaws of its plot device into figuratively showing us all what life really is. It reveals to us things about our time here on Earth that we never realized existed. And that's why I think it's a great story. This was the Zeno story. Join me next time as we tackle another great story. Cheers.